And we are live February 1st, 2021. Rad Ray alongside the good doctor herself, Dr. Ellen Wald. And today, before you come in, Dr. Wald, I've got to wish my daughter, Ella Kate, happy birthday. Today she turns 11. So happy birthday, Ella Kate. This morning I kind of halfway forgot about it because I was sleepy. This podcast. But I remember now. I remember before she left.
Happy birthday.
So yeah, it's crazy. I've got a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 5-year-old, and Piper's going to be 2 in April. So it's
Wow.
yeah, I'm getting old. Okay, Dr. Wald, we have a lot to get into. Let's see here, but real quick, I just wanted to touch on something. Anyone who follows Dr. Wald, she put out a nice thread this morning or just a few minutes ago going through the articles. And I tagged one on the end there because I wanted to kind of circle back around. Last week, you put out a piece for the War Room and Hot Take about Bitcoin can't beat the government if it comes to that. And then almost as if the Indian read your piece, they're like, yeah, we're going to, bravo, Dr. Wald. we agree with your sentiment there. We're going to put the crackdown on you. And I've had some listeners who've reached out to me about my thoughts on it. I think this, so let me take it. I'm curious. Now that we're kind of seeing the first crackdown, I've said on the show for quite some time that if you want to avoid U.S. sanctions, you could switch to kind of crypto. You could do something like that to try to get around them if you want to, something. But governments won't do that because they don't want to. I don't think governments want crypto. They're going to push back. I know the Bitcoin guys are like, yeah, we're going to fight it. I mean, if you want to go for like a full blown war, then yes, sure. But I think crypto is a lot more fragile, maybe, than folks would like to admit. Janet Yellen's obviously been critical of it, and that's what you talk about in your piece. Is this? I don't want to say the beginning of the end of crypto, but it's a fork in the road, right? I mean, this is India cracking down on it is why would you go to the Indian whatever crypto they're going to release, instead of going to Bitcoin? So to me, it seems like a big fork in the road with 1 point however many billion people involved.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that, like I said in the piece, I think it really does come down to an issue of sovereignty in many respects, because the right to mint coins and to determine the currency and to set, like currency and interest rates and control currency is a big sticking point. And when you look at the sovereignty of nations, and Bitcoin is basically saying, we're going to do our own currency outside of this. And so, of course, a government isn't going to want to, to allow Bitcoin, because it's a challenge to their sovereignty. And so that's why I think that even without outright banning it, like India, you can have a lot of there are a lot of ways that the government can make it untenable to own Bitcoin. And that's, as small as them, Janet Yellen come out and saying, look, a lot of Bitcoin is used by, drug lords and terrorists. And so, we're going to audit people who hold Bitcoin, under this pretense, or just say we're going to audit you. And that's enough to scare the crap out of a lot of people who are like, I don't want more audits. Like, I'm dumping this stuff.
No, I think you're right. I think that, if you're a hardcore Bitcoiner, you've kind of thought through all the issues and that you can kind of expect this to be coming and you're kind of prepared for it. But it doesn't take much regulation, as we've seen in 2020, to get people to, fold up their tent and go home. And so I think that the Bitcoin stuff is, you could see a certain portion of the population that kind of sticks to their guns. But I think you're right that if a little resistance, most people are not that, or don't have that risk tolerance. And so they're not going to want to go down the path. And so you'd almost have a compounding problem where, the middle to lower income is stuck on the dollar. And then you have this certain elite that's on the Bitcoin. And then you've got two elite, you get the government elite and these elite. I don't know. Would you like to use a bifurcated monetary economy?
That's a really interesting concept. Like, that could really, I could see that happening.
Okay.
Well, in a terrifying way.
No, it's not a rosy picture for sure. So, one other thing, did you get any GameStop stock last week?
No, I did not buy. I did not go into that thing. But now that we're getting into commodities, I would love to hear from an oil trader about whether this kind of thing is really possible with oil, given that the contract kind of rolls over every month. So, like, say you're gonna do like a short squeeze, like they're doing with silver. Say they're gonna try to do that with oil. Would you run into problems because, well, first of all, you run into problems like, what if you actually end up having to like take physical delivery of the oil? That could be a problem for some people. It's
Yeah.
like, what are you gonna do with a tanker full of oil? But like the contracts like roll over at a certain point, they're monthly. So like how does that fit in? Is that even possible? I love someone who wanted to like weigh in on
Yeah,
that.
I don't know if the market is too big to be influenced by the Wall Street bet guys or not. It'd be funny though to see them take on big oil. That would be them versus the people trying to
Oh,
battle.
yeah. Well, then, I mean, like, it's interesting then, but also it's not like them versus big oil. It's like them versus like Glencore and
Yeah,
Vitol and like the big trading companies and like Saudi Aramco. Of course, of all, of course, like who would really want to see that happen? Like the Middle Eastern oil producers, they would sure love to see oil bidded up, but they would also be like really pissed because like Aramco sets its OSPs at the beginning of the month.
and the other thing that's gotten a little bit of play here with the GameStop's thing that could tie in if you could get someone to do the oil thing is that I don't know what percentage of the Wall Street bets crowd was moving the market, but let's not be naive to think that the other big hedge funds weren't sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, they're about to bust Bob's short squeeze. I'm gonna go ahead and throw in a bunch of money on this so that I can make it on the uptick too," because those guys
Oh
were,
yeah.
and so I think that when the dust finally settles, we'll find that there's plenty of big institutional money that went on the long play for GameStop that helped set it up. So when you think about the oil thing, you might say, well, there's not enough small investors to do something like that, but that doesn't mean like the Aramcos or someone else or with ulterior motives couldn't get the ball rolling and then backfill it on their side. So let's see here, Joe Hogden. If you accept the premise that someone who borrows motor oil is in fact an oil trader, then I'm your guy.
I was hoping for someone who's like done a lot of deals. But
Well, oil trading is close, Joe. Not quite there. So, okay, let's talk about oil. Biden revokes oil drilling permits for additional review. This is from Bloomberg via Yahoo Finance or vice versa. The Biden administration is revoking dozens of invalid drilling permits issued by agency workers without the approval of political appointees, despite a temporary order for such reviews. Oh, the bureaucracy at work, Walt. It's a beautiful thing to see, is it not?
yeah, I thought this was a great piece, and people should really follow the Bloomberg reporter who's been doing this. Jennifer, I'm gonna butcher her last name. I think it's Zlowy. Anyway, because she wrote a story earlier in the week about how like they'd approved so many permits since they'd issued this order because they were like permits that had already been in the process and explaining it. And now like she's clearly got her eye on the everything because she's like says approximately 70 permits were approved without proper review following the issuance of a department directive that temporarily elevates review of permitting activity. So they did what they thought they were supposed to do, which is approve permits that had been, but oh wait, they need to go to extra review to the political appointee. And this is just like an example of like what is basically what the next 4 years are like. But in case you thought you were in the clear because your permit was already in before the thing was issued,
yeah, and so how far back do you think they can push this? Like if there's a rig on site, could they go, listen, guys, sorry, we realize we rubber stamped this for you, but
well, it says the approvals were invalid under the department's were invalid under their order. It says that companies are being assured they're not going to face penalties. Okay, so if they started drilling or something like that, then they're not going to be penalized, but they're going to have to cease the operations while getting the new approval. So if you started drilling, you got to stop, but you're not going to be fined.
Yeah, but okay, right. So to think about that though, you got the rig out there and you've already paid to mob it up, and you start drilling, and you're 600 feet down, and you get the notification, hey, sorry, you can't do it anymore.
And what if you're one of the 33 that are in the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah, that's even more.
Think they have like texting out there?
Yeah, they just turn off their communications, like cut their mobile. Sorry, we can't get any phone calls, no emails. But I mean, this is if you're drilling and you're saying that you've got to stop drilling. That's how I'm reading this, unless I'm misreading it. That's problematic. And so the other thing would be is that even if the Biden administration, in their 60-day period, they start issuing new permits, you now have to worry about this being a tool that's leveraged against you, where they come back and say, oh, we didn't realize that we stamped these and we should have done this. And so it's a scary precedent, but I'm assuming that they're going to try to file injunctions or restraining orders, whatever, to allow them to keep drilling if they're on site right now.
I guess so. Follow Jennifer, because apparently she's got her eye on it.
That's a pretty substantial risk if they're stopping you while you are drilling, and so it's a lot of money that will be lost.
Have to put my thumb on the spigot.
Yeah, I would just if I was a CEO, they're saying there's no fines, there's no penalties, I would just call the IT department, shut down the servers, unplug the phone, don't make a deal. Drilled, and then be like, oh wow, we missed that. Sorry. That would be my goal. Okay. Keystone XL, the project that stays in the news despite the fact there is not a whole lot of news. No, kidding. Canadian rails see crude increasing on Keystone cancellation and DAPL uncertainty. This is the least surprising headline I read all week, right?
Yeah, but I thought that a better headline would be like Keystone XL cancellation makes is Biden making crude by rail great again?
Well, his buddy Warren Buffett's got to be happy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we basically got Canadian crude by rail is having a resurgence thanks to make crude by rail great again.
But doesn't Buffett own the rails? I don't
know if he owns all of them, but he has
a lot of them.
Here's the thing, and I looked into this a while back. Maybe things have changed, but I did look into it. And I'm like, it's so hard for rail companies to do really well. For some reason I was interested in CSX because it has a headquarters in Jacksonville, and so I looked into all these rail companies, because you might think ooh, more crude by rail, good for the rail companies. They never really make that much. I'm sorry, it's just never. I don't know what it is, but they just don't ever seem to do that great as stocks. I mean, maybe Buffett has special extra powers or whatever, but
maybe he just uses it as a tax write-off. Then if they're not making money, he's just writing off a bunch of cost.
There you go.
So the other question, Ellen, is, okay, so let's say that you are a railroad company, right? And they're blocking pipelines because the pipeline is not environmentally safe. If I was a railroad lawyer, I would petition the government to give me some kind of tax credit for being the safe alternative.
That would be the irony of all ironies, because crude by rail is so incredibly unsafe.
Agreed, but the government has admitted that you are the safer, implicitly admitted that you are the safer alternative.
Yeah, the environmentally. Well, see, yeah, except yeah.
They haven't said it. I'm saying, if you're the rail company, you should be going, listen, guys, you're putting a burden on us by making us take all this crude oil because we're so environmentally safe that we need a little credit here or something.
Yeah, environmentally safe. Just forget all of those explosions and derailments over there. Don't look behind the curtain.
Yeah. Well, or the other thing could be is that the oil and gas lobbies should sue in favor of the rail companies getting the tax credit, so that it would be exposed. Yeah. I think what to see is that someone goes after that angle, because then you would have to deal with the safety of the pipeline versus the safety of the railroad. So, okay. All right, let's see here, Ms. Walt. Okay. Yeah, I saw this the other day, and I guess I don't know if it's since our last show or this is an updated story, but anyways, GM aims to end sale of clean diesel-powered cars, SUVs, light trucks by 2035. And before we go any further, we have this is GM talking about their Chevy Volt, and they go plug it in. And they're asked, let's see here, I'll just play this. So
just play the video. Let the video do the talking.
Let me see here. I can pull this up on the screen. Share screen. It's a minute video, so it's not very long.
Extremely grateful to be here today, and in fact, this is a chance for me to say thank you more formally. The Chevy Volt is upstairs. We'll be able to take a look at it. We got about 1,000 photos.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
The batteries are in the trunk.
No, the battery in this particular design is a T shape right down the center and across the back seat area. Because everybody thought we killed the electric vehicle. No, we didn't. It's alive and well.
So what's charging the batteries right now? What's the source of
Well, here, it's coming from the building.
I mean, is it what's their mix of power?
Oh, actually, Lansing feeds the building.
What's that?
Lansing feeds power to the building. So I don't know.
They're
I bet you they're a bit of coal. Oh, they're heavy on natural gas, aren't they?
right now the car's charging off of your grid.
Right. It would be charging off our grid, which is about 95% coal.
Did he say 95% coal?
Yeah, he said 95% coal.
About 95%, which probably
About
means
95%.
98%, probably a little higher. Okay, here is the fundamental problem with the grade movement, not at the top level, but at the average level, is exactly what we saw in that video. Person takes thing, they plug it into other thing, and they go, ta-da! Thing works. That right? But then when you ask that question, well, where's the power coming from? Well, it's being powered by the building. Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. I thought I saw the concrete magically. Okay. No, where's it really coming from? Oh, well, we don't want to talk about that because 95% coal.
When I shared that on Sunday. That got me like a lot of hits for a Sunday tweet. But so someone said, like, do you think that they're just willfully ignorant, or are they being malicious? Like, are they just like stupid, or do they know that they're like pulling the wool over everyone's eyes? And my thought is, like, if they were trying to be like malicious, like if they knew what was going on, then wouldn't they have had a better answer to that? Because that's a very obvious question. You think like PR would have prepared them to either deflect the question in a really good way, like that's not our responsibility, or, well, we make sure that when we charge our cars that it's always a mix of clean energy, or we're working towards a cleaner mix of energy, like something. Like, there are a million ways you could have dealt with that. That was not, I think about 95% coal. Like, that's like the worst possible. Other than the fact that he seemed really sincere, which was kind of cute. Like, if you were trying to like obscure that, then you would have had a better answer. It just seems like they don't care, or like no one prepared them.
Yeah, I would think that. Well, for the Lansing Power guy, I don't think he's a dog in the hunt, right? I think GM who has the. I think I don't know if she knew or not, but. The other thing to keep in mind is, have you followed the what's the story? The Apollo CEO with the Epstein story. Apollo Management. He's like a hedge fund guy. I can't remember his name. Anyways, so he got tied up with Epstein somehow, and they had him
literally.
Well,
tied up. Potentially.
This
is not an X-rated podcast, Ryan. I'm sorry.
But it came out about 2 years ago that he had been given Epstein money for something. And this is before Epstein went to jail and slipped on a noose. But after he'd been
slipped on a noose. Okay. Sorry, let's take a minute.
But after he'd been convicted of, in child prostitution or whatever the official charge was, okay, and so someone asked him literally on their quarterly call one question about it, and Apollo gave I can't remember the guy's name, but he had like a standard answer. The next analyst did not do a follow up, did not do a press, did not do anything. Just went on to quarterly earnings or whatever the question was. And if you go through the whole transcript, there's nothing there as far as really tough questions like you didn't know this, anyways. So, long story short, they finally have released the guy. They keep saying he did something wrong, but whatever. My point is that I think that most people are expected those type of questions. Like, they're not expecting to get, well, no, like, they're saying, "Where's the power come from?" The building. They go, "Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah.
I mean, they're not expecting to get the what's the power mix? Where what percentage is coal? What percentage is natural gas? What percentage is renewables? And so I just don't think that these type of people get pressed on the questions that much. Or the other thing is, she did know. She played it off pretty well, and they didn't expect the Lansing power guy to be talking a lot.
She's like, I think it's natural gas.
Yeah.
5% coal.
Like, what's going on here? So I just think that you remember talking about the Elon Musk, the Oakley sunglasses on the quarterly call. All right. I just think they get the softball so often that they don't really especially talking about green. Who really questions the green narrative?
It's so true. I mean, like John Kerry, like not getting any questions about like his private jet emits more than more emissions in like a trip or whatever than would be, or emits more than like any emissions that would be saved by transferring the federal fleet to electric vehicles. It's like, well, we could make everybody buy EVs in the federal government. The federal government have to all buy EVs, which is totally insane because like half of, or more than half of their stuff is like trucks out in the middle of like Wyoming and the Bureau of Land Management and national parks, where you're not going to just like come across a EV charging station. Or they could just ground John Kerry.
Yeah, that would do it. I've got a theory on that since you brought it up. Not John Kerry, but the EV thing. Here's my theory. So Biden has announced his audacious plan for like 500,000 vehicle conversion, whatever it is. He knows, and his advisors all know it's not possible. And so what's going to happen is they're going to do it for 2 to 4 years. It's going to fail, and they're going to get 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever. And then it's going to set them up in a second, first term for Kamala or whatever, to then go say, listen, we failed at this time, but now we know what we need to do, which is do this to get to our mark. And so it's almost as if they set the goal that it won't work, and they know it won't work, but that's not the point. The point is, once you start it, it's really hard to stop it because you've invested so much money. You got to keep it going. So what do you think? Because to your point, there's just a lot of spots where it's not practical.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally, but I don't even think they need to get it to work at all. Like anyone to actually do it. They just need to say we made an executive order, and like every department just has to like send in their report, which says not feasible at this time, or we purchased 2 new EVs to replace the cars that were dead, and like that's all we could do with our budget, because it's not like they're giving them money for it, right? So I think it, but then like Kamala's gonna run on, we switched the federal fleet to EVs, and like no one's gonna fact check that.
That's true.
So it's just like bothers me, but it also bothers me because of this whole thing, like, if the point is to reduce global emissions to stop climate change, then grounding John Kerry's private jet would be the best solution. Like, why don't you actually do the stuff that would actually help, like grounding your private jets instead of fussing over like everyone's little automobile?
Yeah. So just so we're clear, John Kerry, Ellen and I, each week we sacrifice by doing this over StreamYard or Zoom or Skype. We don't get on our private jets and fly back and forth to do this show in person.
My private jet is indefinitely grounded forever, in that like I don't actually have one.
Yeah, I've grounded mine as well. And so, we could fly back and forth across country to do this show.
Heck, I haven't even been on a commercial airplane in almost a year. Like I am saving the planet.
You're carbon neutral. You're carbon
Yeah.
neutral. You're carbon neutral.
I
Okay.
make my own crackers, and we know I'm carbon neutral.
I do have a piece that I'm working on. I think I'm going to release it for the War Room, which is talking about climate justice. And so here's just a few. Make sure I haven't missed anything, Ellen. Who's built 99% of all the roads in the U.S.?
Like what company?
No. Like what institution?
Oh, the federal government probably, or I don't know, probably states.
The government,
but like a lot of them. Yeah, the government. Oh yeah.
Especially
other than if you're in Maine, probably logging companies.
Sure, but that's not 99%. I'm talking about like the roads and highways. This government. Okay. If you want to build an airport, who approves that?
That's the FAA, right?
The government again. We're back to the government,
Yeah.
right? If you want to have a big harbor, a big port, and you want ships coming, who approves that?
Government.
Okay. So, and if you want to drive on those roads or fly on those airways or enter those ports, who approves that?
Also government.
Okay. So here's my thing. Here's what I'm thinking before I do this piece. I believe that the government should institute climate justice because they're talking about that. And I've identified the biggest culprit. It's the government. If
The government.
if the government didn't let us do all these things, we would not have these problems. Therefore, I mean, I
The
think
government should cancel itself.
it's that simple.
Yeah, as opposed to like sending a windmill to a like Hispanic community on the border and be like, "Here's your windmill."
So we don't need. I've saved the taxpayers billions of dollars of investigations, and it was simple as that.
Cancel yourself. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm debating writing my column about this GM issue mostly because we didn't talk about it, but my favorite part of what they actually say in their thing is that they want to end tailpipe emissions, which is not the same thing as saying they're going to sell EVs. Think about that. Tailpipe emissions. You know who also wants to end tailpipe emissions? Saudi Aramco. When I was there several years ago, I got to see their carbon capture car, where they basically capture the emissions from the tailpipe and store them in a canister in the trunk, and then you can like switch that out. I really wanted to drive it, but they wouldn't let me.
Interesting. Okay.
So tailpipe emissions, does it necessarily?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't read that deep into it. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, it was like, I just read like the first line of it, and I was like, they don't say that they're going to only sell EVs. They just say that they're going to end sales of tailpipe emitting cars. That could also be like, they could be natural gas hydrogen powered vehicles. Like there's a lot of room there. So,
That's an interesting observation.
I don't know. I'm thinking about writing about that or some other idea that we'll talk about.
So a few years ago, we had the bromance between the Saudis and the Russians. Do we have a new bromance brewing between Exxon and Chevron, Ms. Wall?
But see, can you really call it a bromance? I think it's more like the band might be getting back together because, and by the way, for like half an hour before the show, I was like reading up on my like Standard Oil Trust and, these like old books. Oh, and my absolute favorite American history textbook, which is called Inventing America, which is what I used when I was taking my oral exams to like refresh myself on things I didn't know all about Standard Oil. So, okay. So one of the things people have to remember is that ExxonMobil, it was actually a merger of Exxon and Mobil. Exxon used to be Standard Oil of New Jersey, and Mobil used to be Standard Oil of New York. And way back when in 1911, I actually started the antitrust case against so Standard Oil is a trust. Here, what's an oil trust? All right. So interesting thing about Standard Oil. So Standard Oil was started by John D. Rockefeller, who actually was in the upstream business. He was a refiner, and he bought like a bunch of refineries and put them together, and had like a bunch of competitive refineries. They formed an alliance to control output, keep prices up, negotiate shipping rates with the railroad, and later they built their own pipelines. Very smart. Then, so in the mid 1880s, he like turned it into a trust where basically the member companies exchanged their stock for certificates in Standard Oil Trust, and then later, the state of New Jersey allowed holding companies. So a lot of companies became like domiciled in New Jersey so they could be holding companies. And that's how they got Standard Oil of New Jersey, which was like the big Standard Oil. Then later they started to buy and lease their own oil fields. And they eventually, by 1898, controlled a third of the nation's oil supply. So fast forward to Theodore Roosevelt. Well, first of all, the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed in 1890, but it basically wasn't really used until Theodore Roosevelt got super into trust busting, and they busted the Standard Oil Trust, which was like, this is anti-competitive, it's hurting the consumer, break up. And so they broke up into a bunch of, and then they appealed, and it finally went to Supreme Court, and in 1911 the Supreme Court ruled that they had to break up. So they broke up into a bunch of companies, Standard Oil of New Jersey, which became Exxon, Standard Oil of New York, which became Mobil, Standard Oil of California, which became Chevron. Ding, ding, ding. Mm-hmm. And then there were a bunch of other ones, also Standard Oil Ohio and else. And it turned out in the end that John D. Rockefeller made like a lot more money after the break, like from the breakup. So the breakup didn't end up hurting him in terms of his money. But what's so funny is that like we've had these companies, like all these companies broke up, and then over the years, it's like someone sent them apart, and now there's this magnet like drawing them back in together. And we just learned that apparently last year, Although apparently if you'd been paying attention, you actually would have learned it last year. But that ExxonMobil and Chevron were talking maybe about merging. So I was going to say if they do merge, or if they actually restart the talks and go through with it, if it is even allowed by the, if it's even permitted to do that, would they then go after Aramco? Because Exxon, Chevron, and Mobil were 3 of the 4 original owners of Aramco. So, like, are we really going to get the band back together?
Okay. Is there such thing as a hostile takeover on the Saudi exchange?
Yeah, no. Well, so that would be interesting. Could they buy up those shares? The problem is that only 5% of the shares are actually on the market. However, the Saudis did say that they want to offer more shares. So, like, if Exxon and Mobil and Chevron and God knows who else is in this are willing to pay, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, the Saudis are going to have to offer more shares. Like, they need the cash, right?
Yeah, but like, let's buy it. Would you really want to do it now? I don't know. What I think they're actually going to do, as an aside, I think they're going to try to spin off like their pipelines as like a separate company and then float that, or like, like the shipping, like spin off different things, as opposed to keep selling more shares now at a time when it's not really worth it. But like, if oil shoots up to like 80 or 90, then yeah, I bet they're going to try to dump more shares.
Okay, so my take on this, and there's kind of my understanding is that the Chevron Exxon talks were last year, and that they've ended them, which I read to mean that they're in serious talks. They're trying to see how the market would respond if they do it. That's kind of my take on it. What's your take on it? You think they really broke up the discussion?
I don't think they want to deal with the government regulations. Like, I don't think they want to go, and because it's a merger like that would need approval.
It would need approval, but the other thing to consider is, okay, if you're Chevron, this is pick one side of this equation here, and you believe, rightly so, that the Biden administration is about to regulate the heck out of this thing, merging with Exxon does not help you in that regard.
No.
Y'all have probably equal, departments for that kind of stuff. However, a lot of mid-sized producers, whatnot, could use the benefit of being absorbed by a Chevron or an Exxon. And so you could go absorb a lot of companies who don't want to deal with maybe the methane regulations or whatever it might be. So you could pick up a lot of companies for a decent price because they won't have the regulatory capacity to deal with this stuff. So I'm not sure. I do wonder if the idea is being floated out there just to see what kind of traction they'll get. I don't actually think that they're going to sign a deal tomorrow, but I suspect that they want people to know that they're talking about it, if nothing else. But I'm not sure that it makes sense. I can see it either way. But I do think that if you're sitting there in your Chevron or Exxon, you're going, man, Biden's about to lay the hammer to folks. We can pick up a lot of these small size producers. Then that might be a better play.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, I wonder, first of all, if this is like a cover. They're like, oh yeah, talk about this while we go look for better things to acquire. But it would also, could also be a way around this federal leasing ban, which is like acquire companies that already have these permits that they maybe don't have.
Yeah. So, but that would be hilarious if they got back together with the Saudis. That would be-
That's like my dream. They're like, Standard Oil is back, and now we're coming for Aramco because we used to own it. We'd like to own it again. I don't know. It'd be hilarious. It's not going to happen, but
it's going to happen. But it would be.
Yeah. Talk about history being relevant again.
Okay. OPEC Plus sees almost full oil cut compliance in December. That's a headline. Okay, just OPEC in full compliance is just, you just don't read those headlines very often.
Yeah.
Do you?
What's funny is, like, of course we're talking about December, but also we're talking about January because January is over. We're moving into February, and you know what happens in February? The Saudi surprise cuts take effect. So OPEC is going to head for like greater than ever performance or compliance. But yeah, they're estimating that they've implemented 99% of their agreed oil supply curbs in December. According to a delegate who asked not to be named, the 23-nation alliance known as OPEC Plus aimed to withhold 7.2 million barrels per day of crude from the market in January. And then they're saying that OPEC was 103% compliance and 93% of non-OPEC in December. Wednesday, they're meeting. The Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee is meeting. They're probably not going to do anything other than say, "Yay, pat on the back, guys."
So, have you seen the numbers from China's Lunar New Year?
I think they're really bad, right?
They're abysmal. Yeah, like they were cutting
Yeah.
their prices by like 50 or 70% or something crazy. And so they're abysmal, which makes you wonder all those talks about China's GDP growth last year and all that stuff. It's like, okay, well, the Lunar New Year is y'all's big deal and you're not doing anything. So I think we can put those numbers.
Do you wonder if the Saudis had like knowledge that this was coming when they decided to do their surprise cut?
But that's what remember what I said at the time is that when you deal with OPEC, you have to presume on some level they're talking to other world leaders about what they expect and what they see. Like, why would they not? There's no law against the Saudis calling up the CCP and be like, hey, what's going on here? I mean, right? There's nothing.
Why would they even need to? Aramco's got its own. They've got tons of people over there. They can just say like, hey, what do you guys hear from your buddies?
But I'm saying it's not like in the U.S. where you could get some kind of collusion law or whatever. But
Totally.
How would they not do it? Especially so
you have to assume that they are. Absolutely.
Right.
You have to just assume they're doing it.
Yeah, and so if the numbers are bad, I don't know. I found it interesting that it's not getting a lot of play, but you are seeing some of the early reports is that the Lunar New Year stuff or the numbers are pretty abysmal. We'll see where it shakes out at. But if those numbers are really down, then I think you have to have somewhat of a reset of the demand conversation. But I don't know. We'll see.
Interesting.
But the Saudis are cutting for February and March, right? So in April.
Yeah, February and March, I think they're cutting 1 million barrels a day. I think they're hoping to really see a drawdown in inventory numbers. But people like before it was like, wow, that's interesting. Like tech. Now everyone's like, oh, they were so prescient because like look at the numbers from China now. But back then it was all like China's the best. China's doing great. China conquered coronavirus. Let's all be like China.
So when would they? So let me ask you this: if there were no meetings coming up with OPEC, we would just presume that the 1 million barrels will go back on the market in April, or do they have to actually announce that they're? I mean, is it a limited time, like 60-day deal?
So it's for 2 months, and then I think they're going to meet again in March
to
decide what's going to happen in April.
Okay, right. Okay. So that will be in March because these cuts came in January. For February, for March.
These cuts were announced in the beginning of January and are implemented in February because what happens is Aramco issues its official selling prices for Asia usually in the beginning of the month, like the 4th or the 5th. So they want to have for the next month. So like January 4th or 5th, they were issuing their prices for February because they need nominations. So they want to decide. They want OPEC needs to figure out what it's going to do before they issue those.
So you don't expect it to be until March then?
Yeah, I think in the beginning of March they're going to decide what's happening in April.
Okay. All right. Let's come back.
And I don't think they're going to do it again, but that's just my opinion right now. I don't think. I think they're.
Yeah, if you cut another 1 million barrels so it's March and April. I mean February, March, and you did like April, May. By that time you've given the U.S. a lot of runway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. Okay, nuisance laws and then an ineffective way to hold big oil accountable for climate change. The one, the only, the doctor. I was looking for another term after I ran out. Sorry. The one and only.
Yeah. This is my piece. A little shameless promotion here.
Hey.
But I think it's really interesting because so these localities were trying to basically use nuisance laws, which are basically like laws where they're like, neighbor, you're like your like building of this thing is messing up my property, so I'm gonna sue you, basically. I mean that's kind of like a very like basic idea of it. But so basically these localities, one in Baltimore, and I think the other cases in Colorado, they're trying to sue big oil companies for climate change damages based on local nuisance laws, which I think is not a good approach because, as we talked about, climate emissions are produced globally. And so these lawsuits are totally irrational because, like, how can you say that Exxon or BP or whatever owes you damages from climate change when, like, China's the biggest emitter? So I really like China emits more than 1/4 of global greenhouse gas emissions. How can you say that this one oil company caused this flood in Baltimore?
Right.
You can't. I mean, that's in my mind, you can't. And so I think that really what they're trying to do here is I think that they're not. I think that, like, they're not a good approach if you really do want to stop climate change. But they're a great approach if you just want to, like, get money from big oil. And I think that they are actually about politics and payday. I think that like, if you look at who's actually working on these suits and, like, pushing them, it's more just about getting money out of an easy target, or what they see as an easy target. So the Supreme Court is heard oral arguments. Basically, the question is, are these suits going to be heard in federal court or state court? And if they're heard in federal court, they're much more likely to be dismissed than they are in state court. So the Supreme Court is basically hearing arguments on whether or not this case should be heard in federal court or not. And we shall see. If the Supreme Court rules that they should go to federal court, then they're probably just dead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem here is, and you've touched on it some, is that the jury, who is a jury of the peers to try to figure this out, right? Because if you're sitting there and you're trying to understand climate change and all the complexities involved with it, that's first off, there's a lot of bad information out there. But if you're being serious and they said, okay, hey, here is this plant and here is this thing that's happened, and we're trying to connect those dots. Well, I mean, the oil and gas company could do a pretty easy job, I think, of bringing out all kinds of numbers of all kinds of pollutions and all kinds of impact all around the world that would be hard to refute. You'd say, look how much China, coal is used in China and all this stuff, and the wind blows this hard and it carries it this far, and, like, you're going to get into complex weather patterns. And I mean, I'm being serious. Like, think about, like, so instead of saying, so anyway, so I agree that it's you're not doing anybody any favors here. And if you want to say there's some kind of localized environmental impact that's just measurable, like the river had this percentage of toxins in it, now it has this percentage, and the plant puts out this much into the water, that's pretty easy to measure. That's one thing that you can do. You're talking about something a little bit broader, like climate change. Going to be a little bit harder to follow, I think.
Yeah, exactly. There's a big difference between, like, suing someone for pollution or, like, a water pollution or even air pollution. But we're not talking about air pollution. We're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, which is, like, such a hazy subject.
Yep, agreed. Okay, let's see here. 2 more quick stories before we get here. Russia cuts crude exports to avoid fuel shortage. That's a awkwardly worded headline. Like, we're cutting to avoid shortage.
That is kind of funny. Yeah, they don't want us. They're cutting their they're cutting to avoid a shortage at home. Basically, they're like, we're running out. We don't have enough oil at home, and so we can't export more. I thought I had this article pulled up, but apparently I had something about Saudi Arabia sending more oil to South Korea. Mm-hmm. So, give me a moment. I'm just gonna...
Okay. It says oil companies agreed that Russia's gasoline stocks should rise 1.6 to 1.7 tons by May 1 from current levels of 1.2 million tons to avoid shortages and price spikes when demand picks up in the spring and summer. Now, what's interesting is the Russians weren't wanting the Saudis to cut, right?
Yeah, well, the Russians have permission to increase production, not by that much, but by somewhat. The funny thing is that it's the federal ministry, the energy ministry, and the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service that are asking oil companies to all do something together, which is kind of cute.
So what's your read on this? What's going on, you think?
So I think it's interesting because it shows that there's a lot of demand in Russia. I'm not sure what it's for. Are we talking about fuel for heating? Are we talking about gasoline? I have a feeling we're probably not talking about jet fuel. And so it says the move to cut crude oil exports and increase supplies to domestic refineries. It doesn't really say. It says the oil companies didn't have any choice but to agree. They were disappointed when they rejected the request for changes. It doesn't really say what is the issue in Russia? Are there shortages? Are people experiencing shortages of gasoline? Is this the real reason for the riots? What don't we know?
I thought the riots were over Albania or whatever his name is. No?
Yeah, I don't know. Basically, I don't know. That's a really good question. So the oil companies agreed their stock should rise to avoid shortages. Okay, here it is. Okay, so basically they think that they're going to have shortages in the spring and summer because demand is going to pick up in the spring and summer. And so they better refine more and put it into storage now because they think, but what if they're wrong? What if, coronavirus rears its ugly head or they decide to do some sort of a lockdown in Russia because of their political protests, but they frame it as a coronavirus lockdown.
But doesn't this hurt their economy, though, right? Because they're going to make more on the exports.
Oh, yeah.
Economy works.
Yeah. Oh, the oil companies were pissed. They were not happy.
Yeah. Russia.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Last one, fossil fuel transportation. Expect oil price spikes as capital investment declines. I've been hearing a lot of talk about this debate over the capital in the U.S. and where it's going and whatnot. You've kind of been on the record that if prices are high, people are going to invest, and I think you're starting to hear that being picked up a little bit more as well.
Yeah, I think that it's a big issue people aren't talking about. I think if we look at who's been investing, the UAE is really the only company that hasn't cut capex. Yeah, I think the biggest question with this isn't if, it's just when. When are we going to see this really start to affect the market? And some people say some people like this idea that the oil may be on the way out, but it will be a long goodbye. I feel like that's a throwaway line that they have to include in the article just to be well, BP and these others say that we've already hit peak demand, but they're even if demand peaks, these companies are going to have to invest a lot just to keep the amount of oil we have steady. It's come on, guys. We've talked about this. Demand is not peaking. Nobody really thinks demand is going to peak. That's a thing that they say to make the politicians and whoever and the stakeholders feel better. But that's not a thing that they actually believe.
Well, if demand has peaked, you might say a near-term peak, the next year or two or whatnot, but that's not a good thing. It's like with the Lunar New Year. Lunar New Year demand down is not good. It's bad. And so if we have a short-term peak to where we don't hit 100 million barrels per day until 2022 or 2023 or whatever, that's not a good thing. And so no. I think that's kind of being lost. But I think there's too many people trying to frame the debate around the coronavirus or the economy and certain narratives, and they're trying to avoid certain realities. And the reality is that if demand on some level in the U.S. will look differently once we get back to fully open because people move, stuff has changed, less flights.
Apparently the entire world is moving to Florida.
Well, at least it moved to Texas. So we've already got Elon Musk, and he's drilling for oil and gas down here in Texas now. So
Yeah. So what's interesting is that so a report from the IEF and Boston Consulting Group says that total investment into oil and gas exploration and production fell by 34% last year, which is the lowest since 2004. And annual spending at that level won't satisfy the world's energy needs in the coming years, as the report said, even if the recovery in oil demand is not so great. They're still going to need 27 million barrels a day of new oil and gas supply by 2022 just to offset production declines at existing fields, which means that annual investment needs to be 25% higher than it is now over the next 3 years to stave off a supply crisis. That's much faster than the pace of recovery after the 2014 and 2016 slump. I think this is very interesting. So
Real
we
quick,
better get into it big time.
well, what you have to have happen is you have to have these tech stocks kind of get crushed. Because why would you, even if you thought oil was a decent investment, why would you invest your money into Exxon when you can get 10x return in Tesla? I mean,
Yeah.
so,
Well, here's why: because Tesla is really a clearinghouse for carbon, for like carbon credits. So with it, that happens to make cars on the side, and so the more oil and gas development that's going to go on, the more these companies are going to have to buy offsets. So that's why you invest in Tesla.
but you see what I'm saying though is that and so real quick, if Elon's drilling for gas in Texas, which he's trying to do,
Like himself.
well, yeah, they have a SpaceX. They're drilling for SpaceX.
Oh my God.
Oh, you hadn't heard the story?
Sorry. I missed that. They're actually drilling. I thought they wanted to like buy an old rig and repurpose it for something.
Oh no,
They actually want to drill.
Oh yeah, they've leased land and everything. They bought a
Holy moly, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, can we go out and like watch them?
Think about it, though.
Can we take a road trip?
Let's go. I don't know if they're drilling today. I think they're waiting on we go down there. But think about it. So you have Elon, who is on one hand has all these carbon credit things he's doing with Tesla, and the other hand he gets to the oil and gas business. Well, he might actually.
Oh my God, it's like what?
Right? He just he's a genius.
Yes.
He's a genius.
How come Exxon isn't making, car EVs on the side? It's apparently not that hard. Just like lease a production facility and like make some EVs on the side and get tons of carbon credits so you don't have to like oh God. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So he'll probably own Exxon. He'll be Tesla oil before too long. He'll own
Tesla oil?
Yeah, he'll
That's
own
great.
on everyone else. So
That's great.
Where will you be this week?
Well, I'm on Bloomberg Law Insights, as we discussed. I will be on the War Room and Hot Take of the Day with a new column on Wednesday. It will either be about GM's tailpipe emission zero tailpipe emission cars, or I think I might look at this whole like carbon credit thing and what big finance companies are doing to basically prop them up, or kind of like a little scheme thing. So anyway, it'll either be about one of those two, and I'll be on investing.com as well.
Okay, I can't say this with 100% confidence. Whatever you write, it's shaping international policy, as we saw with the last week. So it's a must read. Comes out Wednesday morning. So, okay, Ms. Walt, thank you, listeners. Thank you.
Where will you be?
The War Room. I got the piece. I've typed it up on the Climate Justice, kind of spoofing the fact that literally, if the government just had done anything, we wouldn't. If they wouldn't have built them stupid roads, they wouldn't have. So I've got that kind of piece spoofing that. I've been having a debate over term limits, and so I might continue that. So I put out one last week. One of the opinion writers responded to that this week, yet this morning. So I might tackle that, and then corporate donation laws. And
nice.
Yeah, I did do an interview. I think. Folks who are interested in the China stuff about the Uyghurs last Thursday with Sean Roberts.
So, I saw that. Yeah. I've been really interested in the Uyghur thing. I've been like reading a lot of this stuff. People really should. You should read about it, listeners. Yeah. It's important.
Yeah. So okay. So I'll be around, and then yeah, that's it. So we'll talk to everyone next week.
Bye.